Remember when MotoGP was all about 2-year rider contract cycles and you didn't really get a silly season in between because everything was set, no one was moving? Well, that is comprehensively in the bin now, isn't it? The MotoGP 2026 rider market is all over the place, and it is not just because of Jorge Martin's latest bombshell antics. I'm Matt Beard. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast. Val Horinci is with me. Simon Patterson is very busy at the Isle of Man TT, but we've invited him to do some rants to camera and into his dictaphone to chuck into this episode for us to mull over and react to, and give him no chance to respond because he's not here. So let's see how that goes. We're going to go through each manufacturer and how they should, in our view, solve what we see as their main rider market problem. Because right now, Val, I think it's fair to say no one has quite got a balanced lineup where everyone is getting on with the bike and everything works, have they?
No, I wouldn't say so. Although for some manufacturers, that's a bigger issue than for others.
Yeah,
I would argue.
Some have got one rider who's doing so well they almost don't need to worry too much. But if that rider breaks a leg, then yeah, things aren't good. So let's start with one of the manufacturers very much in that position, Yamaha. Now, Fabio Quartararo is working amazing miracles for Yamaha right now. Jack Miller, I would argue, is having a very decent start to life at Pramac. You can't really judge Miguel Oliveira because he's been injured. Alex Rins is kind of in the same boat, but his injury was a long time ago, so tricky one. Before you come in with your take on the Yamaha situation, Val, and what it should do about having kind of 1.3 riders across 4 bikes at the moment, here's Simon with his take on regular rumour favourite Toprak Razgatlioglu, who's being linked with a return to the Yamaha ranks and another Pramac chance in his latest appearance in the MotoGP rider market rumour mill.
I think the fundamental problem for me with any rumour regarding Toprak coming to MotoGP is that, I mean, essentially he's MotoGP's the boy who cried wolf. We've heard so many times mainly from Kenan Sofuoglu, former World Supersport champion, and his manager, that Toprak is on the verge of a MotoGP deal. We've heard it over and over and over again. Probably going back the best bit of 5 or 6 years. And I mean, we've even heard it with Pramac before, because we've heard him linked to Pramac back when they were a Ducati team. But here we are, once again hearing rumours, this time linking them to Yamaha, a manufacturer that he's already dabbled in MotoGP with that test on the M1 a few years back that by all accounts went disastrously badly. And I'm not convinced. Whenever you read into a lot of the news that's come out of it, a lot of it is basically sourced from Kenan. It's Sofuoglu telling people that they've signed a contract, and that is something we've heard before. It would mark a bit of a change in approach if the reality is that they have now signed a deal with a satellite Yamaha team in MotoGP, because they've also always been adamant that it would be factory only. And yes, I know that Pramac are a very factory spec satellite team with full factory backing, but that wasn't good enough for Toprak and Sofuoglu back whenever they were the exact same status as Ducati. So there's a lot of reasons why I'm skeptical. None of that means it's not going to happen, of course. This could finally be the deal that comes together and changes things despite, what we've experienced in the past, what we've seen before. So maybe this is the deal. If that's the case, I think Toprak's probably going to be in for quite a difficult 2026, because everyone I speak to agrees that simply the way he rides a motorbike, how aggressive he is in the brakes, how aggressive he is with the front tyre, isn't going to work with Michelin. It obviously gives him a year to learn MotoGP. It gives him a year to be in the paddock ahead of the switch to Pirelli in 2027. We don't know yet, it's important to say, what sort of tyres that Pirelli are going to bring to MotoGP, because they've never built a prototype tyre before. It's not like whenever Michelin came in and we knew that it would be kind of a rear biased setup because they built MotoGP tyres not that long before. This is a very different situation, different scenario. But you would imagine that Toprak is going to be at least more comfortable on tyres made by people that are making the tyres that he's already riding on. It will make 2026 difficult, but that's the risk that he's been needing to take for quite some time. And I mean, the reality is, I hope it happens, because MotoGP deserves Toprak. He's a massive showman. He's a pretty spectacular rider on track. He, I think, is important for the sport, bringing the audience that he does from a different part of the world. A very, very committed, very, very passionate fan base, it's worth saying. And MotoGP needs a little bit of that at the minute. It deserves some of that sparkle that he's going to bring. It's not going to be an easy process for him, and I hope that doesn't mean that people kind of lose faith in 2026 should the Pramac deal happen. But let's see how it works out. The only real issue I have with the whole thing is that it's probably going to come at the expense of Jack Miller. And I don't believe that Jack Miller deserves to be booted out of MotoGP right now based on the performances he's delivering. This is, by far a stronger Jack than we saw at KTM. This is a Jack that I would argue is as capable as the Jack Miller that was riding a factory Ducati a few years ago, because he's, at least at the minute, able to match a teammate who everyone knows is very, very special. Fabio Quartararo is operating on a different level from the other Yamahas most of the time, and the fact that Jack is touching that really, really drives home what a good job he's doing at the minute. And it's going to be a shame if he ends up on a superbike ride because, essentially, politics.
Okay, Val, so Simon is Top Rack skeptical, which I kind of get given his boy who cried wolf situation over the years. But what's your take on this? Can you see him coming over, and can you see it being with Pramac and Yamaha, and should it be?
Yeah, it's been reported, so I can see it. And it's been reported by Speed Week with a specific announcement date of Mugello, which normally, I mean, look, anything happens, but I think that's a fairly firm. That's not just an interest. That's not just exploratory talks. The suggestion is it has happened, and it's not just been coming from Speed Week. And of course, we can probably trace a lot of that back to the Top Rack camp, but I would be not surprised at all at this point if that was indeed to be the case, and if the deal was to be announced. I can't say I totally understand the game plan. Not for Top Rack, because Top Rack's wanted to make it happen for a long while, and it makes sense to get a run-up even on the unfavorable current Michelin tires relative to the Pirellis he'll get. It makes sense to get a year in, makes sense to put yourself in the best possible position to succeed if you're not just doing it as a MotoGP tourist, if you're trying to actually achieve something in it. No offense, it's difficult, especially it will be difficult at his age. I'm not necessarily being mean. I'm not trying to denigrate what he's accomplished in World Superbikes, but it's the most preparation he can get, even if it's on a different bike. The most paddock preparation, the most working methods, etc. Blah blah blah. I think that's all very, very useful. I think Yamaha really has to be banking then on the fact that the MotoGP Pirellis will carry over the same characteristics or similar characteristics of the World Superbike Pirellis, or likes the marketing aspect of it, which also fine, no real issue with that, or just believes that Top Rack's talent is such, and his specific ability, his braking ability is such that the rest will be secondary, and it can truly benefit even on what will have to be a reduced timeline, because the whole the best part of getting a young rider from Moto2 in is they're like 22. So if you get everything right and you nurture them and you keep them in your camp, you get like a decade of performance. You get a decade of not having to worry about one of the seats in theory. With Top Rack, you don't get that. It's interesting to me. I don't know. I guess you might as well do it. I would still probably have a look around Moto2 and try to prioritize one completely. Of those. What is most interesting to me is it sounds like there's lineup flexibility that we didn't really expect there to be, is how I would put it, just from all the conversation. I think we'll know coming into the next weekend at Aragon, basically by Thursday, even if the announcement is theoretically at Mugello. I think at Aragon already, people will know how real this is, and they'll know it either from briefings from team personnel, manufacturer personnel, whatever, or they'll know from how Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira conduct themselves in their rider debriefs. And this is the surprising part of me, because I went back and looked, and that's never a good sign, but I went back and looked at the initial Miguel Oliveira press release announcement. It says 25-26, but it has not been publicly discussed and treated like a 25-26 contract.
By either side necessarily?
Not really, no. But especially by the Yamaha side, from what we've been hearing, what we've been reading, etc. It sounds like a 25 with a 26 option, which might be like a two sides option. At which point, I never understood two sides options anyway. If you have a two sides option, that's just a new contract, I would argue, because it requires both parties
to agree
again.
To
prolong it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't sound totally secure. And also that same Speedweek report says that, it'll be Top Rack at Pramac with Miller or Oliveira.
Yeah.
You'd think that if there's a 26 contract, there's only the one guy who can be replaced. Now, current performance, it's Oliveira who's getting the boot. It's not
Completely
his fault necessarily in any meaningful way. He's not really had a proper real chance to show his performance. You could make the argument, and you would be correct to make it, that he started the season before he got injured worse than Miller.
Yeah, it's a limited data set, but testing and that little bit before he had the Aldeguer collision and got hurt, Miller was the clear standout in that team. So if you're looking at it on pure form,
but that shouldn't be enough. Why do you sign a 2-year contract and then there's enough for it to be ruined by one preseason? Then what are we even doing here in terms of the?
This is the fashion. Well, it's the fashion in MotoGP this year. Sign a 2-year contract. Don't even get on the bike. Just bin it before you've really ridden the bike without a broken everything in Jorge Martin's case.
I think the best and fairest solution, let's say if you have to put in Toprak somehow, and honestly, I don't think there's a contractual flexibility to do that, nor any indication that would happen, but the most logical solution for everybody involved was to tell Alex Rins to go find something else.
Yeah.
Sadly. Also for Alex Rins' sake, because I don't really see a light at the end of the tunnel. In that one, I don't see how he gets a new contract for 2027, 28 on the basis of everything that's happened so far. Maybe you're holding out hope that, he's going to be a major part of the 27 bike development, and he'll make it a little more to his liking, and he'll be further removed from the career-changing injury of 20. What year was it? 23.
23, yeah, now. 2 full years ago, pretty much this week.
Yeah. But he would also, I think, benefit from a fresh start.
Yeah.
I increasingly suspect and feel that way.
Yeah, this is a really sad situation, because the idea of Alex Rins on a Yamaha, I love. I think Alex Rins is a superb rider, and this is a bike and team that should have suited him. It hasn't worked out. Like you say, it shows no sign of working out at any point anytime soon. The injury makes a massive question mark. A fresh start is sadly the right option there. So if you're looking at what is Yamaha's rider market problem, it's the guy you've got on your second works bike next to the person who's on the brink of winning races for you again looks a million miles off doing that. And what you said earlier about looking Moto2, get someone for 10 years. Yeah, totally. I would agree that Pramac, Miller is the one you keep hold of for now. Okay, he's not been executing races fully, but all the speed, all his best moments, the highlights reel for Miller is great, especially for a bike he's only just jumped on. So definitely keep Miller. If Oliveira, it's such a small sample set, I would say you keep Oliveira for now, unless you're desperate to get Toprak in. But Toprak is a punt in himself, clearly humongously talented, but we don't know if that will translate to MotoGP. He is in the second half of his career, to be fair, without wanting to denigrate his age or anything, but he's not a Moto2 graduate rookie. That's what I think Yamaha needs. You know better than me who that should be. You'll have stronger Moto2 ideas than I ever will. But, I don't... just because Quartararo is doing so well doesn't mean that Yamaha only needs one competitive works rider. In thinking back to the mid-2000s, if you think of Quartararo as Yamaha's current Valentino Rossi in terms of lifting the brand and bringing it forwards, Yamaha could have just carried on with Colin Edwards, notching up some podiums next to Valentino Rossi indefinitely. But it took the massive pit-shaking punt of bringing in Jorge Lorenzo, because he was so good, caused tons of friction, but it banked Yamaha's next few titles after that. It set itself up for the long term, even when it had a talisman who was in the prime of his career. So if I'm Yamaha, I'm going, right, who is my next Quartararo already? Probably put them at Pramac first. I need to put them at Tech 3 first, because fully in Yamaha mid-2000s mode. Put them at Pramac first, and then kind of bring them through and know where you're going into the 2030s as well. I understand why you look at Toprak. There's so many benefits to it. I think the fact that he had bad tests with Yamaha before, motorsport's a pragmatic world. Think of some of the riders and teams, drivers and teams who've got back together that you never thought would happen. So I wouldn't rule it out on those grounds. He's too interesting to MotoGP to ignore forever. So I do hope it happens. I would be intrigued. I hope it doesn't cost Jack Miller anything. And I hope Alex Rins' MotoGP career can continue in a way that works for him, but I don't think that should be on that Yamaha seat. So before...
I think all of the important thing for me to say is, because sometimes we all want riders to get a good deal and a good cut, but I think it is important to objectively stand to the side and say, apart from Fabio Quartararo, every single person in that lineup is expendable.
Yeah.
Every single one. But that's...
relatively speaking, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think like we talk about, yes, Miller I think has been the clear second fastest, but he's still closer to that zone than to the Quartararo zone. So as long as there is any way to try and find somebody who at least approaches the Quartararo zone, I think that is a swing you should take.
Without wanting to disappear down a massive rabbit hole on this occasion, so try and limit yourself to 45 seconds, who would you look at in Moto2 right now if you were thinking who might be a bit of a foundation for the future?
Problem is, I was going to make that argument for a future manufacturer in this.
Hold it if you like. Hold that thought.
I would like to hold it. I would just say that it's the obvious one, probably.
Let's move on to Aprilia, whose rider market problem is the rider they've signed wants to get out. Jorge Martin has been seen in the Aprilia kit since we recorded our last podcast. He turned up to their All-Stars event, which seemed completely incongruous. There's been another medical update as well, which it was not negative, not like crazily positive. It just feels like things are not quite fixed yet, but they're on a decent path. They're kind of where you expect. There's been rumours that the Sachsenring would be where he'd attempt to race again if there's a team willing to give him a bike. The next medical check is in 1 month's time, which will put him in place potentially to return at the Sachsenring if that medical check is good. Val, I think maybe before we go into what Aprilia does for 2026, the more immediate rider market problem for Aprilia is, do they actually put Jorge Martin back on that bike when he's fit to race? And if they decide legally they can't, won't, shouldn't, what do they do instead?
Look, I think they will. It looks like they will now that the Aprilia All-Stars appearance has happened and everybody seems to have been able to put on a brave face and just continue as if nothing really happened. I'll hold my hand up. Because when Simon asked me at the end of one of the recent episodes, will Martin race for the Aprilia again? I was like, well, that would be stupid. But clearly we're going to try to do that. So clearly he's going to be at the Sachsenring there on the Thursday, presumably, asking complicated questions from the media, and with the Aprilia press officer standing to the side and listening very, very keenly on what exact words come out of Jorge Martin's mouth. I guess you might as well at this point. I do see some sense, because it's not like Aprilia needs to give more work to Lorenzo Savadori, and Martin does need to get himself back into race fitness before he goes to ride the bike he actually wants to ride, whatever bike that is. It could be the Aprilia next year also.
Yeah, I've heard he's open-minded, that statement.
Sounds very, very possible. Yeah.
Well, we're not going to go down this territory too much in this episode, but if they're all willing to be pragmatic enough to go, actually, we need a rider who's not Savadori because this isn't his job, and Martin's like, I need a bike to prove I can race a MotoGP bike again, you actually could see a marriage of convenience pragmatically somehow working.
Yeah, it's just the atmosphere is going to be very strange. Everything is going to be strange. Every session, like every media appearance is going to be strange. Everything that happens in any way, like anybody making any sort of mistake, is going to be strange because everything's going to be viewed through the prism of the thing. So I wouldn't want that as the rider or as the team, but maybe that's the path of least resistance. And again, maybe they'll get together again for 26. Sure. I
mean, that is the door that they keep leaving a tiny bit open in the way that every time there's any hint of it in any phrasing, we go, well, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
But I didn't think I'd see him at All Stars either.
Yeah.
Smiling in Aprilia kit. So the rider market dilemma for Aprilia then I'd summarize as who should be on their bike in 2026. And part of this, I think, is it worth them still trying a hard sell with Martin and having him up their priority list? Or is it a case of cut your losses, probably promote Ayagura as your safest bet if that's doable with Trackhouse? And then if you're doing that, what do you do with Trackhouse, where Raul Fernandez needs to not be at Trackhouse anymore for his sake and Trackhouse's? So Val, basically, apart from Marco Bezzecchi, the rest of the Aprilia chessboard, what do you do?
So I think it's important to look at the wider context of Aprilia and the place it occupies in the modern MotoGP rider market, and the way we've seen it happen again, as we've seen it happen before. Aprilia is the Suzuki of the past in that it's a good team making good bikes with limited but not bad resources, bikes that punch above their weight, I guess. And it's a team that cannot beat the other manufacturers in a head-to-head for rider services. on the rider market, it feels like, just cannot outmuscle them, whether it be in terms of built up faith or in terms of the financial muscle. Just cannot do it. Suzuki had that same problem over and over and over again. And Davide Brivio, when he was in charge, solved it remarkably by every time just going to Moto2 and going, all right, we're going to nail that pick. And like 3 times in a row, Maverick Vinales, Alex Rins, Joan Mir, what Suzuki could get them in, because this was still the era of MotoGP where a factory seat trumped everything. So you had some other interest in those guys, but none of the other manufacturers felt in a position where they could immediately offer them necessarily a work seat. And Suzuki could. And that's how it got Joan Mir, for instance, because I'm pretty sure Honda was quite interested at that time in Joan Mir, but Honda could not offer what Suzuki could, and got Joan Mir, and it was rewarded with a championship. But even then, like straight fights, it lost. As soon as Maverick Vinales got really, really good, Yamaha came in and said, we want some of that. That's ours now. And Maverick Vinales thought about it for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever, and decided, yep, I also want me some of Yamaha. And they just lost that battle. Now, the problem is the landscape has changed. Now, I think riders have seen that as prestigious as a factory seat is, it doesn't have to trump everything, that you can win a championship on a satellite bike if you get your timing right. And if you look at Aprilia's rider history of like almost everybody they've signed under this MotoGP program, right? Everybody. It's like, it sounds really mean because it's not their fault, but it hasn't been anybody else's first choice. So Aleix Espargaro was discarded by Suzuki. Andrea Iannone was discarded by Suzuki. Scott Redding was discarded by Pramac Yamaha. Sam Lowes was out of Moto2. Lorenzo Savadori, test rider. Bradley Smith discarded by KTM. Maverick Vinales self-discarded from Yamaha. Marco Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin, not discarded by Ducati, but deemed expendable enough in not being promoted to the factory seat. Aprilia has to hunt on the margins every single time. Every single time Aprilia has to hunt on the margins. It has to, I've used it before and it's maybe not the best comparison, it has to moneyball it. It has to see riders that other manufacturers have not seen the surplus value in. It has to see riders that it believes it has a better read on their value than other manufacturers. That's such a hard way to live. And now they're going to have to fill a lot of seats in that mold. It's really difficult.
This is an amazing build-up, and I cannot wait to hear the names you're going to commit to firmly at the end of it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't just want theory.
This is my, it's still theory because I don't know that they're going to do it, but look at what Davide Brivio did at Suzuki and do the same thing. And this is my suggestion. Go to this riders. I'm going to keep some suspense. Go to their entourage, go to whatever, tell them, we're going to buy you out of your Moto2 contract, whatever it is, or whether it's a 2-year contract, which I think it is. We're going to have a look at the KTM current situation. They don't have anything. They can't offer you a stable program. They don't have a proven winning track record in MotoGP. We can make you a factory MotoGP rider tomorrow. We will not put any pressure on your results. You'll do whatever you want. You'll learn however you want. We just want a reasonable year commitment, like 3 years, 2 years, whatever. We just want to make you part of this project to build. That rider is David Alonso. Go to David Alonso, offer him exactly that. David Alonso has started to come good in Moto2. He's, he had a rough start of the season, but he's really figuring it out. He was really good last time out at the in Silverstone. Probably should have won the race, which is very, very impressive for a Moto2 rookie. He is, I think the evidence right now is he is the guy we've seen in Moto3 on bigger bikes. After all, start like an insane charm offensive. They have to swing. They have to really go for it. There is no marginal sort of added value, small piecemeal solutions that if Aprilia's ambition is still what it was in signing Jorge Martin, I think you have to go for those really, really big targets. You have to try the Davide Brivio way. You could, for instance, go to Brad Binder, try to, find something, figure something out there. Maybe Binder will feel that a change of scenery, maybe KTM program won't continue or something. But I think you have to try to really surprise and gazump, to borrow a football term, everybody else to try to find that added value, what people are still waiting to see, whether those guys will fully prove themselves. You have to get in there now. You have to risk those people flopping, I think. And I think that's just the paradigm that they have to live in, unfortunately. And David Abrivio is now part of the camp, sort of, as the Trackhouse team boss. So ask him who he fancies. Maybe Ayagura is that guy also, potentially. I mean, let's not forget about him, definitely. And maybe that's kind of the path of least resistance. And then you offer Trackhouse move for Diogo Moreira for Moto2, who's a reasonable, both marketing move and clearly a very talented guy. And then for the other ride, you just throw up your hands and try to get a good veteran who's been left out in the shuffle. Maybe you look at how Luca Marini's recovery goes right now.
Yeah, true.
But I really like my Alonso idea. I can't see it coming to fruition, but it's what I would try.
On to Ducati, which used to have the problem of, we've got too many riders, they're all really good, what do we do? Oh, we'll just promote Marc Marquez, then they'll all leave. Solved. VR46, I think, is the issue at Ducati right now, in that, the whole Valentino Rossi thing. I'm going to be I don't want to come across as negative about Valentino Rossi, but the idea of VR46 as kind of being the Rossi continuation project in MotoGP, I think, has less resonance now, because it's not like it's being an Italian talent pipeline in the same way anymore. The Rossi guy in that team, Franco Morbidelli, is effectively past his best, and to be blunt. It's not like when it was Marco Bezzecchi in there, it felt like it was like, yeah, that's what the Rossi team is here for. I don't think Rossi owes it to MotoGP to be the number one talent finder and to be a regular paddock presence now, because he's done the small thing of transforming its global reputation 20 years ago. That he's done his bit, but it does leave VR46 itself in a slightly weird position where it's basically running one of Rossi's mates and another Italian who's not turning out to work quite as well as we thought. Now the bike is a bit trickier, although Fabio Di Giannantonio did have a better half the Silverstone weekend. Val, if you are Rossi / Uche Salucci / Ducati, what do you do with VR46 next year? Because to me, the current pairing of Didier and Frankie doesn't seem like one that should be there for the long term.
That's not bad. I think it's fine. I think the results have been, I don't think there's been any meaningful results this year, and I don't think that every satellite team every single year needs to have like true A-listers in it. So even if it's a team that carries Valentino Rossi's name, I think the only part of the equation I would consider is that the Acosta thing just refuses to go away.
Yes,
coming up. I think there are some factions within VR46 that see it as quite attractive, that idea. I think I would not be surprised at all, even though he's never publicly said it necessarily, that Pedro Acosta likes the idea of not only having an actual Ducati bike that can win, but having, racing for Valentino Rossi.
Yeah.
There is a certain romanticism to him, clearly, that I think maybe will offset the loss of earnings that will have to come with taking a satellite Ducati ride, especially as, again, that ride is good enough to do really, really good things on. I think you try that, you see whether there's any mechanism to it. Doesn't sound like it, but you try that, you have a look, you ask Ducati, hey guys, do you want to maybe help us take away this guy who maybe then can future-proof your lineup for ages and ages and ages? But if not, you stand pat. Fermin Aldeguer, we know VR46 had some interest in Fermin Aldeguer before the Gresini thing happened, like the year prior, and it's just the cost of extracting him from the Moto2 Boscoscuro deal was too prohibitive, so he spent an extra year in Moto2 that wasn't all that good, but fine, was basically. Maybe you talk to Ducati about that and about moving him over, but you don't have to. That doesn't sound necessary.
Yeah, I don't think there's a gain for Ducati in that, because my first thought was like the third best Ducati rider now, the best non-Marquez Ducati rider in terms of performance versus expectation and experience and stuff, is definitely Aldeguer in terms of what he's doing. But I think he's fine where he is for another year, and then you work out if he's turning into the person you put in the works team when there's a vacancy.
The gain for Ducati might be that it sounds like there's contractual priority now with Pramac gone to VR46 over Gresini for factory spec machinery, is what it sounded like last year. But does that matter right now? Do you want factory spec machinery?
No. You might come 27. That's the
yes.
That's the issue. But then he might not be in that team come 27 anyway. So I'd kind of put the VR46 dilemma is more kind of, if you're the one satellite team who could entice Acosta because of who your boss is, make sure you do it. Basically, if no other satellite team could get Acosta, factories don't seem to have a route to. If you're the way of getting this kid, you should do it. The other Ducati rider market dilemma is not an immediate one, because I do not see any change for 2026, and neither does anyone else, I would think. But Pecco Bagnaia is obviously not in his finest state alongside Marc Marquez, not living up to the 2 title wins and the 2 title bids. Simon is going to pop up from the Isle of Man TT again now to talk about some of the rumours about what Pecco might do next.
I would really, really, really love to know where the rumours linking Pecco Bagnaia to a factory Yamaha rider coming from, because it's complete nonsense. It's just not going to happen, especially for 2026. There's no way that a rider as considered as Pecco Bagnaia and as intelligent would have given us basically the long rant that he gave us at Silverstone about how important it is for both riders and factories to honour their contracts, knowing that he was on the verge of breaking a contract. It's just, he wouldn't have done it. He's far too intelligent for that. And I think he actually believes what he said as well, where, you know, he kind of morally believes he signed a deal, he's committed for 2 years and he's not leaving anywhere. But even beyond that, Pecco Bagnaia is going to be a factory Ducati rider for life. This is the team that he's going to end his time in MotoGP with. I'm fairly certain of that, because of the commitment he's shown to the brand since day one, because of the way that the brand respect him and love him. And I don't think that a season where he's struggling to adapt to a new bike, something that we have seen him do before in Ducati and MotoGP, is going to be enough to convince him that it's time to immediately run away to another bike that's, let's be frank, not as good, and where he's going to remain, if that's one of his concerns, as second fiddle to his teammate. Because if you go to Yamaha right now, then you're not going to be Fabio Quartararo. Just like at Ducati right now, he's not delivering the same results as Marc Marquez. I think an element of it is probably that Pecco is thinking about the long game, because he's intelligent like that. Marc Marquez isn't going to be around forever. He's got, let's be honest, maybe one more MotoGP contract left, one that'll take him through 27 and 28, whereas Pecco's got another 10 years here. He can remain at Ducati for a long, long time. He can do a lot more. And I think that any chance of him going anywhere else, at least in the short to medium term, is just laughably incorrect. Sorry.
So Val, what do you make of that? And what do you think Pecco should be thinking about his future?
I'm with Simon that early termination sounds impossible, and the Yamaha thing, I've also read it, and it's like, maybe it's been broached. I just don't see the point for either party necessarily. I know that maybe the easiest way to look at Pecco Bagnaia's future trajectory is try to find yourself again on a bike that isn't the bike Marc Marquez is riding.
Yeah,
that's where you can get the edge. You can build that program around yourself, etc., etc. I don't think that's happening at Yamaha.
That's not Yamaha, is it?
Yeah. As Simon said, another problem there. It's complicated. I think his best route is just trying to stick it out as a Ducati lifer and just bank on the fact that Ducati will always have a soft spot for him. Will always give him a bike that's good enough. Will always, well, I say always. You never know with some of the young guys coming up, but use the credit that you do not have. Maybe with other manufacturers. At the same time, there is also the argument of, like, the more you remain in a situation like that, the more your value tanks, the more difficult it is to convince some other employer to see their program with you as its centerpiece in mind. But to be honest, if I'm other manufacturers, I already don't necessarily, like, it'd be good for some of them, certainly, but if you've seen Bagnaia lose to Marquez, there's got to be a part of you that's like, well, I want to find the guy who I believe can beat Marquez. Yeah. Even if that's probably not true, I want to have plausible deniability of that. And Pecco Bagnaia has hurt his plausible deniability of that this season. Still an exceptional rider, still a two-time champion, but just, you want the upside. And I think his upside is what's been hurt this season. I think stay at Ducati.
I think
Ducati lifer.
I think get out for Europe, only because the fairy tale romantic end for me for Pecco is go somewhere else, win some races, prove that you were mega, you just weren't Marc Marquez.
It's a legacy thing, yeah.
It's a legacy thing, and at the moment, the ending is going to be, oh, maybe your titles weren't so deserved after all because look how you've been thrashed. Now someone better's turned up. I just want to be get on another bike, do something mega, show everyone you were as fast as you always gave the impression that you were. The only problem was you're not Marc Marquez, and that's been the problem for so many people for a decade plus. Honda, a team that needed some people who weren't Marc Marquez to be good and has been scrabbling for that slightly. they're without wanting to get too much into the Martin situation with them, we think Honda is the most likely place that Martin will turn up. But I think their prime dilemma, with Luca Marini's situation uncertain due to his really horrible set of injuries, their prime dilemma is what should they do with Johann Zarco? Because is it too obvious a move to turn down to bring the guy who's looking so good for you onto what should be your best bike in the works team? Or do you leave well alone and leave him where he's thriving at LCR? Here's Simon's take on that.
For me, the question of what happens with Johann Zarco's future is probably the easiest one of this silly season, because there's no one at all that's more deserving of an extension to their Honda contract right now than he is. I mean, he's won a race for them this year. He's done an exceptional job. I know it came in wet conditions, but he immediately backed it up with a dry second in Silverstone. It's been a really, really good start to the season for Johann Zarco. By far the strongest in terms of results for any of the Honda riders. And I know that arguably Joan Mir has been faster, but he's not seen checkered flags, and that counts. Mir is on a 2-year deal and will remain. Honda obviously are trying to sign Jorge Martin to replace Luca Marini. And we knew originally that there was a little bit of talk that Honda were keen to keep Marini somewhere within the ranks, maybe at LCR. But I think off the back of Zarco's recent performances, it's the easiest call in the world to extend his contract for another 2 years like he wants. In fact, that's one of the fundamental key things that he's essentially demanding. It's really his only demand, because he doesn't want to be in this 1-year contract cycle that he and others have been kind of trapped in before, a la Jack Miller right now at Pramac. So he wants a 2-year deal. He wants the latest factory spec bike, which there is no reason not to give him, because they've been giving it to him already and it's paying off. And he wants to be able to, remain with this LCR team if that's an option. That team, that highly, highly experienced team with a real kind of multicultural European base that I think Zarco works really well with French and Belgian and Italian and Spanish guys all around him, is working. He's happy. A happy rider is a fast rider. Let's just announce that Zarco's staying in MotoGP for another 2 years and let the job be done.
Matt, you asked whether it's too obvious. It's to turn down. It's not too obvious to turn down. He's 52. That has to come into consideration, right? He's one of the oldest riders on the grid. I think not. Is he the oldest now?
If he's 52, he definitely is. Yeah.
Well, yes, yeah. Oh, that came off as really ageist. I just thought it was going to be funny, but now
it was. I laughed.
I don't
keep going. You've committed.
I'm sorry, Johan. You're still absolutely in your prime as a human being, etc. Just in terms of building a MotoGP program around. And it's not only that. The guy they're trying to bring in, clearly Jorge Martin. We have a sample size of how those two compare on the same machinery and the same team. I pick Martin every single time, every day of the week. That's no insult to Johann Zarco, because that's a comparison to an actual MotoGP world champion. As much as some would have forgotten that in the last few months over everything, it's a guy who's won the title. I think Zarco, does he deserve it? Has he done a good job at Honda? Is he fast? Is he very impressive? Is he qualifying spectacularly? Yes, to all of those. I would say he is sort of breaking the convention of what a veteran experienced rider is supposed to do. He's a phenomenal qualifier who wins through that, which you don't necessarily see at that. Like, even when Valentino Rossi reached that, he was never a phenomenal qualifier, but he was a particularly bad qualifier when he reached that part of his career. Like, wasn't working at all for him. It's just not how you see it normally. And Johann Zarco is doing what he needs to do. I think LCR is okay. I think a multi-year LCR deal is okay and all good and all fair. For me, the bigger question is, I understand sponsorship. I understand you need local interest. I understand you don't want to bin a rider off after one season, especially when that rider has barely had the chance of fitness, and you certainly don't want to upset a major market by doing that. From a sporting perspective, the LCR lineup should be Zarco Marini, right?
Yeah.
I mean, am I being unreasonable here? There's no disrespect to Somkiat Chantra, who I'm not unhappy at all to see on the grid, but if you're asking me for like a sporting, like what should Honda do with its two LCR bikes, there is no sporting argument for it not to be Johann Zarco and Luca Marini. There is none. It doesn't exist. All the arguments are other arguments, and they might be good other arguments. I think they are good other arguments. And I don't begrudge Somket Chantra like a proper chance in MotoGP, and I think he is definitely better than recent rounds suggest, because I think his decline, like really sharp competitive decline compared to what was actually pretty great preseason, was like, clearly it's the arm stuff. It's got to be the arm stuff, because it was really, really sharp. It's like the pace comparison is strange. It's unusual. So that has to explain a big chunk of it. But still, you know what I'm getting with this.
I see where you're coming from. I like the Chantras on the grid. I'd like more young riders to be on the grid and have some chances. In Honda's particular situation, like you say, there are 4 better options for its 4 bikes. If this was a 25 bike grid with another manufacturer on it, or if someone else had an extra, if there's another satellite Honda team, absolutely, Chantra's very welcome on the grid. I'd love to see how he develops. I think he's done some really interesting stuff, not consistently in Moto2, which is the issue. I think he's got some high peaks, and then some other times when actually, regardless of the arm injury, you would expect him to be qualifying and starting last on merit. So yeah. Joan Mir, though, this is maybe I'm being too much of a Mir skeptic, but if we talk about riders who need a change of scenery, as we have a few times this episode, Mir is still really high up my list. I just don't see what either him or Honda get out of him plugging on with, he's crashing a bit less, but how many times does Mir speak to the media and sound like someone who is enjoying being at Honda and should stay at Honda for a long time? Because I just don't see any logic in this partnership continuing a minute longer than it has to now.
No, I don't either, because I think he's used up the time that he was going to have to establish himself as the program's focal point. I think now, even if things meaningfully improve, I think the program will start to gravitate towards other riders, just inevitably. And actually, I haven't thought about this pre-episode, but Mir to Aprilia makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah. You know how sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night having like a MotoGP rider market brainwave. Mine a couple of nights ago was, Mir, go to Aprilia. Just take that punt, because neither of you have got a lot to lose at this point.
Yeah, and it is like a surplus value thing. It would be worth making a bet of this guy who won a championship. It was an unusual championship, but he won it, and he was very, very, very good the year after he won the championship. It's not like Joan Mir has only had one good MotoGP season. He's had 2. That's 2 is not a lot, but 2 is more than I have.
More than
yeah.
It's more than, you could argue, it's more than Bezecchi's had, potentially.
Yes. So have that, see that as surplus value. I like that a lot. I think the timelines maybe don't quite align, but I really like it. I really, really like it for everybody involved, especially for Joan Mir and for Honda. The crash bills must be going up there. It's already, I'm surprised they haven't bankrupted themselves already with all the carbon fiber orders or whatever. Is it even carbon fiber? Why did I say that? Formula One mode.
Parts of it will be.
Yeah, parts of it will be.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we're all agreed that Zarco stays put. Martin is a sensible move for Honda to explore and probably do in the circumstances. And beyond that, actually, basically you can't drop Marini right now. I think Honda probably might, but the other sad issue with Marini is it's the sort of set of injuries where you look at the list and you go, some of that could have a really bad long-term kind of impact, and we need not just him to get back on the bike, we need him to be back on the bike for like 3 months or something to know, like, is this one that's going to really...
Sounds like he's at least going back to Italy fairly soon.
Yeah.
And like some of the reporting suggested that there's some tentative optimism that the list is scarier than the reality of the injuries. But again, you never know how that translates on the bike.
No, sadly, someone who could end up on completely the wrong side of this random, unexpected rider market is someone who actually, both form and fitness-wise, does not deserve to be shut out right now. We're finishing off with the manufacturer who probably has the least opportunities to solve its problems, because KTM, resource and situation-wise now, is not somewhere riders will necessarily be wanting to go. It's past the worst of its kind of financial fears, but still the picture is too cloudy for the future for anyone to be going, I'm definitely going to commit myself to a KTM future. So, Val, KTM's rider market dilemmas, I would say, are, to a degree, holding on to the people it's got, although I don't see that there's obvious, aside from the Acosta VR46 thing that won't go away, Brad Binder, Pedro Costa, Maverick Vinales, you assume are going to keep the faith of KTM, stay put because they either want to or don't have any choice. And here Bastianini is a really interesting one. This sounds like a relationship that should be over from what he's been saying and how he's been performing recently. If that's the case, does that happen for 2026? Where does he go and what's KTM do?
I remember Sky Sports Italy wrote that he'd been talking to Pramac. I wonder if Toprak cuts off that route, or if somehow there's a possibility for Pramac to have a full lineup clear out. Because again, as I said, nobody there is expendable. Is indispensable necessarily. Everybody there is expendable. I don't know if it's worth the. You also don't want to have the reputation of a team and a manufacturer that just tears up existing deals, hunting for any sort of surplus value that you can find on the market.
No, but also Yamaha's got a bit of credit at the moment for plugging on as long as it did with Valentino Rossi, for one thing, and that's a bit of a different case, but also Morbidelli had longer at Yamaha than he might have been given in different circumstances, and Rins is getting longer.
I don't think we should say a team deserves credit for honoring a contract that's that's been signed by both parties.
So you're so pre-2025. What is the contract in MotoGP now?
Yeah, fair enough. But it's complicated because we don't know what new major investor Bajaj envisions the program is looking. We don't know how Tech 3 fits into the future. There's been some conflicting stuff has been said here and there about whether, for me, honestly, it's not like about the Tech 3 or anything specific I've heard. It's just about if Bajaj green lights the 2027 program. I think it's still quite a big step to also go, and we still want 4 factory contracted riders.
Yeah.
4 of them, all equal terms, basically, all equally. It's like, that sounds difficult for the situation KTM is in right now. That sounds doubly difficult for a new set of regulations coming up for 2027. Commit to like a full spec, full fleet.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's secondary to any development costs, but to me, that sounds like a big hurdle to overcome. And there's a part of me that is wondering, is there a version of this KTM program that just goes, okay, Maverick Vinales, Brad Binder, hold the fort, and then we'll run that, and then we'll see whether the economic situation stabilizes so much that we can really properly restart this.
If you were doing that, assuming that Acosta will not be willing to hang around to the hold the fort situation and will be poached for somewhere else, you could do an awful lot worse than Binder and Vinales for that.
Certainly.
Also, if you're looking to save a few quid, Bastianini will not be on as cheap a wage as, for instance, a Moto2 graduate, and KTM still has more than enough fingers in Moto2 to know what's going on down there. You could pretty much take a punt on that bike and have a reasonable chance of it doing better than Bastianini in his low points at the moment. But yeah,
kind of. You look at the standings and it doesn't look that bad. I mean, there's still the skill set is still the skill set. Nea Bastianini can still do certain things. It's like he spiraled a bit the last couple of rounds. Have been really bad, but at his optimal, if the problem is he's not going to settle for just doing that. He's not going to settle for hunting P7s, P8s. He's not in that career situation to do that, because that's just a one-way trip to the World Superbike paddock in however many years. So yeah, but I don't know what alternatives exist for him. Again, probably Yamaha, maybe. Try the Aprilia one. See, you guys want an all-Italian dream team. There's got to be some interest, but it is also going to be a bit of hurt stock.
Yeah, I think Aprilia could be an interesting one for him as a team that has the more obvious vacancies, whereas Yamaha, you're sort of, okay, there's question marks over everyone who's not Quartararo there, but there's also so much interest and people being linked to Yamaha that Yamaha feels full quite quickly, whereas Aprilia potentially feels a bit more gappy. But yeah, there's another one there in Bastianini who I think it's not so much the performances, which haven't been great, and relatively to some other KTMs that haven't been great, although Binder's had a bit of a shocker lately as well, it's how he sounds. Yeah, the way, and also like we're judging that on Bastianini's English debriefs, and he's not the most fluent English speaker in that paddock. He won't be expressing himself most clearly. I don't know if that's making it more blunt potentially than he really feels, but I suspect it might be the opposite.
I don't think so. I think his tone never changes. Like he always, happy or sad, he always has the same tone, but the words really, really change. I think because of how like his tone is so calm that he almost offsets it. Like he says everything very, very, very calmly and almost always with a smile. but that almost gives him the credit to then say things that are really harsh and really, really blunt, while while with a smile.
Yeah,
because he's clearly just a very chill guy. But sometimes chill people are the ones who say the harshest things. Wisdom.
We should end on a wise point. So we've ripped up the grid, we've ripped up all the contracts, we've told most of the grid that there's nothing to lose by moving. We've thrown everything up in the air. I haven't let you do a draft episode yet. Might in the summer. This weekend, Aragon Grand Prix. The three of us, we back together for that one after a few where logistics-wise it's been a couple of two-handers and Megan joining us as well. But it's me, Simon and Val reunited at the end of Aragon this weekend. Betting on a Marc Marquez Aragon walkover, Val?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Mostly am. I haven't checked the weather forecast for Aragon, but Silverstone was so weird. And some of the words coming out of Ducati after just gives me a little bit of a question mark about what might happen. And also,
who else is also extremely good at Aragon historically? It's Alex Marquez. Alex Marquez is very, very good at Aragon. But I think, look, Silverstone and Aragon are the two opposite sets of a spectrum for Mark. So especially if anything happens to reset the grip at any point in weekend, I think you pencil it in. Well, I say you pencil it in. He's going to crash on full fuel in the opening laps, isn't he? Because that just keeps happening. So I don't know.
I'll also chuck in one like little fairy tale because I'm in that mode today. Pecco Bagnaia versus Marquez at Aragon in 21, it must have been, was one of the first times.
Yes. Was that his first win? Pecco's?
I think so. It's certainly the first time that I saw Pecco go wheel to wheel with someone of Mark's caliber and thought, oh, okay, I know you've got a better bike right now, but the way you're doing this is really, really impressive. For me, that was like the Pecco day when I took him super seriously.
You overrate the importance of wheel-to-wheel battles. I think wheel-to-wheel battles are secondary to, because 90% of the races you're not close enough to make those count. Is what I would say. And of course, a guy who advocates for Maverick Vinales would say something like this.
Yes,
right?
Of course. I am happy to end this podcast with the honor of being the person who overrates wheel-to-wheel battles because I like them. So.
I could have chosen better phrasing for that. Yeah. All right.
So Val, you enjoy single flying qualifying laps, which I quite like as well. But I'll enjoy the wheel-to-wheel stuff. See you again after Aragon.